I hope it's good for you. Well, you know, I saw a crazy world. Yeah. Really. You doing that? Yeah, it changed things around, so I moved mine back. Man. Oh no, no, no. Aye, aye, aye.
Great is thy faithfulness, oh God, my Father. There is no shadow turning with thou changes not thy compassion, they fail not. As thou hast lived, thou forever will be. Summer and winter, springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars sing their courses above. Join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy and love. But great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, your mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see.
Here, interest-free family. Yeah. I'm a little, yeah, please. A few steps back. Oh, yeah. Oh, and turn a little bit towards, yep, Viola. The stream is started, so you scream all around. So put your hands out. Down. Hold on. I'll let you know. Bring your hands down. Take a small step forward. Hands out like that. Truth telling, day 2 introduction. Truth telling, day 2 introduction. Do it again. Truth telling. I'll give you a cue. 1 second. Okay, go ahead. Truth telling, day 2 introduction. I'm gonna need a big clap. Truth telling, day 2 introduction. Not a big clap. That was big enough.
I hear you talking, say you want your freedom. Well, who am I to keep you down? It's only right that you should play the way you feel it. But listen carefully to the sound of your loneliness, like a heartbeat drives you mad. In the stillness of remembering what you had and what you lost and what you had was lost. Thunder only happens when it's rain, and flames only love. They say women, they will come and they will.
Good morning. I'm Rick Tulsky, and this is the second day of the HART Truth Telling Commission. And we spent the day yesterday hearing much of what is wrong with our world and laying the groundwork for what we might do about it. And I want to thank McCormick and Dr. Iva Carruthers for their brilliance in putting this together. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Damon Arnold, the retired Lieutenant Colonel of the Illinois National Guard and former chair of the State Board of Health. Do I have the policy committee of the State Board? Okay. Well, thank you and welcome, and the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, I wanted to, start off by commending all of you on a panel. I know many of you for years and all the great work you do for humanity and for making sure that people are respected for who they are in a very, very deep level. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story that occurred when I was in the military. So I was landing with a Black Hawk helicopter in Mosul, Iraq. And as I was landing, something happened. And this voice came to me. And I think it was really the voice of Jesus. That's the image that came into my mind. And the question was, as we were descending into these ancient buildings, the question was, why are you still at war? I was here 2,000 years ago. Why are you still doing the same things? And it really made me start to reflect on the basis of what we are as humans. And so the things that happen, like hegemony and ideology, we have stocks of knowledge and memes. We start building who we are as people when we're very young. But people don't know what hegemony is. It's when you go to school and you think you're going there just to learn. You're not just going there to learn, you're going there to become indoctrinated into a philosophy. And you're also being indoctrinated, to think the right way when you go to a church, a synagogue, a mosque. And what they're trying to teach you is what all the books say, whether it's the Torah, the Quran, or the Bible, that you are a child of God. This is something that's supposed to be ingrained in you. So what our society does is that we move from things like collaboration to negotiation to mediation, where two people have to come to a conclusion, but someone else has to help them to get there. Arbitration, where they tell you what to do, to litigation in the courtroom, to coercion when it's a warlike way. Each of those steps that you're taking, going up that ladder, you're losing a thing that's really fundamentally true. It's called agency. Your freedom of will. You are being co-opted. And the root of all sin, of course, is stealing. You steal someone's dignity. You steal their rights. You steal their freedom, their ideas, their land, their life. And that is the basis of sin. That's what was revealed to me. So as you're diminishing this agency that people have, you are going against their civil rights. You're going against what it means to be human. You're going against every principle that is established in every faith-based institution in the world. The fundamental right to be free and to be happy and to live. So right now we are in a time period where, as I was descending in the helicopter, I went to a battlefield. I was a combat medic. I was a flight surgeon. I went out into a combat zone where I saw people being killed, people being injured and maimed, tying up blood vessels so they wouldn't lose their leg. We were going into a area that was really profoundly devastating. I know Father Flager, you see that all the time. So it's not just isolated to a battlefield, but you can have your human rights taken anywhere you are. So when someone overcomes your agency and says that you will do what I say, what they're doing is stealing your freedom. They're stealing every fundamental constitutional principle that was put into our Constitution for a reason. They did not want a dictatorship. Once you start walking off that platform and start moving into a dictatorship, we had the Hague Accord, we had the Geneva Convention, we had things I'm sure they've talked to you about already before I got here. The Nuremberg trial. You cannot be excused for the criminal acts you do. If I was a colonel and I walked up and point blank shot someone in the head, I would be facing a JAG officer. I would be under arrest and they would be trying to figure out what happened. How did you do this? Now, if they can do that to me when I'm in a foreign country with a foreign adversary, supposedly, and this person I'm actually violating, this person who's overseas, who could be an enemy combatant, who could take my life very quickly, right? I still have to be held accountable. I come back here and someone gets shot in the head in a car in Minneapolis. I would have been pulled aside, believe me. The rules of engagement are very, very clear about the protection of human rights. Inextricably clear. Most of the people I know in my time at the Illinois Department of Public Health, I was really deeply involved with emergency preparedness. And in that situation, you see the best and the worst of human beings. But mostly the best. People trying to survive, trying to help each other, trying to get things moving in the right direction. So I had, worked with other agencies, IEMA, with federal agencies, went to many of the meetings in the federal government. And not one point in time did I hear someone say, you can violate a human right. 26 years, I never heard those words. I never heard people say, you could take into your own hands, the right to determine whether you follow this rule or not. So we live by laws, we live by moral codes, and they can steal your moral code. They can steal everything you've learned when you were coming through your training in whatever branch of faith you are in. Take it away from you and dissolve it, and you'll never even know that it's happening to you. When I was coming here, I know that everyone here drives, right? So people break the law every day, right? You know that speed limit sign says 45? How many people stay under 45 all the way? No one, right? So I'm guilty of it myself. That's why I got here a little bit late, but I'm closer to being on time. But as you're speeding and you're breaking that law, there's a consequence you can face. Because if you hit some other car, you run over someone, you get into a head-on collision, you're going to be held liable for what you did to break that law. That's one instance. That's different from what we're talking about. I'm talking about following illegal laws or orders. How can you be held how can you be held accountable for protecting the human dignity, the rights of other people? What kind of society were you in? In Nazi Germany, people didn't step forward. I mean, you know more with the Ecumenical Council than I know about that. But I know that people did not step forward to protect their neighbors. They folded. They normalized it. So as we normalize speeding and doing those kinds of things, you can also normalize acts that are absolutely egregious against the dignity of humans. My viewpoint is that I see people who are being chastised because of the color of their skin, but it's all people. It's all people, it's all of us. When she was shot in that car, she was a white female. It is a fight, it is a denial of human rights and the will to be existing and protesting. When I was overseas, I was holding the hands of people, soldiers, men and women who didn't make it back. I have some who did make it back who no longer have arms and legs. And what they were standing for, whether you believe in the right to go over there or not, is immaterial. They agreed to follow what you're supposed to be doing here, upholding the rights to protest, upholding the rights to make sure that the military is never deployed in a way that is against human rights. You're supposed to have rallying places for the public debate and discussion. You're supposed to be engaged with the system. Without that, we start bombing other countries, 7 recently. We start doing things that are against the human conscience of goodwill and everything we're supposed to stand for. Those people who died over there, they would be ashamed, the ones I know would be ashamed of what's going on. That's not what they were there for. That's not what they were fighting for. Also, the people in the Latino community, they were here first. Sometimes people forget that. There is no such thing as a Gulf of America. We have a Gulf of Mexico. You know why we don't have a Gulf of America? Because when we say the Americas, we're talking about Canada, United States, Central America, and South America. They're all Americas. That's why we say North America, South America. They had trade routes from there going up to Canada and going down to the tip of, you have, Chile, Argentina, Paraguay, all these countries, all the way up to Canada. So historically, to tell people you have no right to be here is like telling the American Indians you have no right. This is actually criminal. And so from my experience and from what I have been seeing, I feel that these are actually criminal acts. I hope people are held accountable for them. They're also civil acts, and it can happen at the state, federal, local level. I don't care for the court system. We have a judicial system for a reason. And I was kind of joking with someone the other day, and I said, you know, SCOTUS, what it stands for me is, you know, Supreme Court of the United States. It's the supreme concubine of the United States now. Where Donald Trump is able to go and screw justice anytime he visits. We have got to get away from that kind of mentality and start treating people like humans. They are our brothers and sisters in God. If we move away from that, we've lost. Sin has won. So I just wanted to leave it with that note and to say that if there's anything that is true, is that inaction leads to defeat. If you don't stand up, and I've heard this before and you've heard it too, you know, if you don't stand up for something, you fall for everything. And if we start to normalize this behavior, we are in a destroyed country. Thank you. Is that it?
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
I want to first thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you.
Colonel,
Thank you.
United States Army.
Yes.
Your brothers in arms here.
Oh, yes.
So we thank you for your service.
Mm.
I know that you are part of the Illinois National Guard as well, right?
Yes.
And so you were talking, you mentioned about the elimination of civil rights and people losing their agency, which is we seem to see on a daily basis. And some of this is coming from the unaccountability of some law enforcement officials at the federal level, but also those illegal orders that have been given by the commander-in-chief, and also followed by those under the command of the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. Could you tell us how that accountability rises to the level of the civilian population in terms of these illegal orders, and what are the ramifications of these orders? Are they pressed under the United States Code of Military Justice, or are they carried out in our civil courts?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. And of course, anything we face right now is complex. But there's very simple viewpoints on it, I think. When we start talking about leadership, there's a book I'm authoring right now. It's going to be talking about leadership and some of the issues that we're talking about. But when you start looking at the way that the orders are given, so if you're an enlisted person in the military, you have a code, you have an oath you take. When you're an officer, you have an oath to take as well. As an enlisted, there's a duty to obey. As an officer, that is not part of the oath, the duty to obey. The reason is that the orders from the officer go down to the enlisted, and they follow and enact things, right? So they engage and they get missions accomplished. But the officer has to have some leeway to make sure that things are being done correctly. And you cannot follow an illegal order. So if someone told me there's an orphanage here, you know, guess what? You know, we have to take care of these kids, but your mission is getting kind of slowed down because of this. So why don't you just execute all the children in there and the, you know, the priest and everyone else in there? I don't care who gave me that order. President of the United States, it goes against the Constitution. It goes against rules of engagement. It goes against everything, the Geneva Convention, right? the Hague Accord. So here we go. There's a point at which a leader is also responsible for the orders they are giving. That goes all the way to the top. So if he's making sure that you break illegal, make illegal decisions and break things, right? We have some right now, some concern about the ships that were being hit off of Venezuela, right? Now, that the people who enacted that, who were in the military, potentially could still be brought up on charges because you followed the illegal order of a commander. So guess who else did that? The SS, when they were in Nazi Germany with Hitler, and they were held accountable. So the illegal orders from a commander-in-chief are just as subject to scrutiny as the illegal orders from myself or anyone else in the chain of command. As far as the citizens go, that part of the question, the citizens' responsibility is to follow laws and to look at that, to peacefully demonstrate, to uphold the Constitution. But guess what? They are the boss of the people who are up at the top. That's the way it was supposed to be. You're only a representative of what I do, right? You're a representative. You're not the commander of what I do. So when people peacefully protest and actually put their information in front of them, in front of society as a general, then people in society have to decide, are they trying to steal my agency? And saying that I have determination of where this government goes. The people of the country set the moral compass for where we go, not the elected officials. And so you don't want to get engaged with, direct confrontation where you're fighting and shooting people and things like that. But if you're peacefully protesting, and my view of watching those videos, the videos to me don't lie. I saw her sitting in the car, and I don't hear much being said about this. She waved 2 cars past her. She said, go around, go around. This 3rd car decided to stop, to get out of the vehicle, to go up to her window and put their arm through and threaten her. That's a direct assault. If I did that in the military, when I was overseas in Iraq, and there was a pedestrian and there was a vehicle that stopped, and I went in there and said, open your window, smashed your window, pulled you out the car, put 2 bullets in your head and your chest, I would have committed a war crime. So why should we have a less of a standard here than we have in a war zone?
Which brings me to a follow-up question, because when we see the imposition of military coming into our cities and civilian streets, the military, as I remember, I was a civil affairs officer for a number of years and chief of training for Joint Task Force Civil Support, is that we come maybe to support law enforcement, but not do law enforcement types of activity. Can you tell us about the difference between the military coming into our cities, the difference between the rules of engagement that you would have in the military, whatever combat zone, and the law enforcement use of force? There seems to be a conflict there that the military does not really know how to engage in civil law enforcement. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, I think I'm old enough to remember, the shootings on the campus with the military. I think it was Kent State. I'm trying to think.
Kent State.
Yeah, right. So there are times when you can go across that border, and there's a red line. okay, when I had three pieces of advice from someone, one of my mentors, and he's now over the Foundation for the American Public Health Association, Dr. Georges Benjamin. And when I was getting into, my role with the Illinois Department of Public Health, I asked him, what should I do? He said, well, there are three things you should remember. He said, the first thing is you only have time to make 2 or 3 major changes, and make sure you focus and make sure you get things done because your time period is so short. The second thing he said was make sure you leave the right way. And he said, what I mean by that is that you want to leave while you're on top, not by request or by scandal. So leave on top. The third thing was don't even get the chalk of the ethical line on your shoes. Don't cross that line. That is what we've been trained to do. Don't cross that line. You're talking about human citizens who are unarmed, who are standing there trying to protest to make sure that your moral compass is in the right direction, that you're doing the right things as a nation. So when I see those kinds of things, the employment of National Guard, there's a certain responsibility we have as National Guard members, and we should not be crossing that line. Helping and assisting the local police with peaceful demonstrations, there's a role. But when we start talking about militarizing people and using them to, deploy weapons, we've already learned that lesson. As a nation, we don't need to repeat it.
I think I'm being signaled that we are running out of time.
Okay, yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arnold. I want to also extend our gratitude to Mr. Keller, who was with the Chicago Police Department and managed the emergency preparedness. And the question that I have that I think we need to ponder is around this issue of martial law and the possibility and the intent of this trajectory for us to be in that situation. What can you tell us as citizens that we need to know about the declaration of martial law and its consequences and our rights in that moment?
Yes.
And then we do have to honor the time in terms of our next
I think Ms.
testifier.
Cordova wanted to ask a quick question too. Oh, no. No, you have a big question. Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cordova. Yeah, so the thing that I want to say is that there's a thing called posse comitatus, right, where you have militias. It goes all the way back to slavery times, And posse comitatus is when you start looking at things where the government feels it has to take control to maintain order. Now, this is the distinction when you put in martial law. When you put martial law into effect, is it for the betterment of society, or is it moving towards a tyranny and a dictatorship? So there is a need for having martial law. When we had the civil rights movements and those kinds of things where they came in and helped children go to school who were being discriminated against. So there are positive things that can be done to institute those kinds of interventions, but they're also very, very negative things. So it's the intent of the person who is imposing the martial law. What are they trying to achieve? And if they're trying to achieve more disorder, a reckless society, trying to dominate people against their rights, trying to obscure and obliterate the Constitution, that's wrong. That's as simple as it can be. If you are using those techniques and those tactics to implement something that's destructive to American citizens and to people who are here, whether they are here legally or what we call illegally, they have a right to be here and to go through due process. Once you get rid of the due process, then you can have things like helicopters coming not too far from here, going over the roofs of buildings and putting children in twist ties who are citizens. That is a dictatorship. Make no mistake.
On that sobering note, thank you so much, Dr. Arnold.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to ask our co-chair, our chair, if we could be sensitive of time, because I think 3 or 4 of us had really important questions that we also wanted to ask. So I don't know how we can solve that, but I appreciate all the questions that were asked.
Thank you, Dr. Neighbors. Just excuse us for a moment, Mayor, while we, my question was really about the follow-up about this idea of not following illegal orders. And we've seen the ways in which this administration has attacked our Senator Kelly, for example, and actually taken away his retirement and so on. And he, of course, is fighting that. And it seems to me that it's a really, really critical and essential fight. And I'm just wondering, even under conditions of attempted martial law, and et cetera, what are the potential hope that we might have around the military being really willing to stand up against illegal orders? I think this is I think that we need to look to them to sort of provide that hope, because if they're just going to go along with everything, then we are facing a dictatorship.
And for me, my question was, how is it possible for citizens of the United States to understand that the armed forces are their armed forces and does not belong to a particular administration, does not belong to the president? How is it possible for us to re-articulate a narrative of the history of so many people in our country who have provided service, like Dr. Keller, like Dr. Arnold, and so many others? We claim that the armed forces are representing the citizens of the United States of America. I am able to go back 7 generations in my family. And in my family, I have records of folks fighting in every single war from the American Revolution to Afghanistan and Iraq. The only one that I couldn't find a record for was the War of 1812. If anybody can tell me who fought in the War of 1812, please let me know. But I think that it's important to reclaim that narrative that the armed forces of this country belong to the citizens of this country.
The next question is, perhaps we need to have someone from Congress and from the United States Senate. They have to talk about the power of the Congress because they represent the people. And so my question would be, what role does Congress play in a situation where the president is violating the Constitution? What role does the United States Senate play? Because they have to take orders from somebody else, and they're not taking them from individual people, for sure. So I think we have to have that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, can I, after you, I'm in queue.
Okay, mine will be quick. I have really been thinking about the lack of accountability, because at the highest level, we see anybody that could be accused could then get pardoned, and Trump has this idea that he can't be held accountable for anything. And it goes all the way down, and even to our own state of Illinois, related to how protesters are being handled. And so we saw on November 14th at Broadview, the Illinois State Police, who were supposedly there to protect the people of Illinois, violently throwing people to the ground and harming them. I am in communication and relationship with some of them. Their injuries are real and lasting. And the governor's office then says they're there to protect you. And there is no accountability. And I guess my question is, so when someone follows an illegal order or does something illegal on their own, I think we need to be very clear about how is the system of accountability breaking down, and what can we do about it?
Thank you again for this intervention, and Mayor, for your allowing this process so there can be later follow-up. My question, and again, Dr. Vicki Casanova Willis, my role here is as a member of the Directorate for ICRAM, the International Human Rights Association for American Minorities, and it is an NGO, as is Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, in consultative status as ECOSOC with the UN. I heard Dr. Arnold, and I was heartened to hear him mention human rights again. But then we revert back to civil rights and that framework and those laws. And so I think it's in the US anyway. I think my question was, what is, and that's from, military leadership as well, what are the international human rights mechanisms, frameworks, courts of justice, accountability measures, of which we are a part, even when an executive order says, oh, we walk out, which has happened many, many, many times, the hands are still in diverting comments, diverting action. And then the second one was, if it was already stated into the record, the ramifications in line with the trauma impacts that we heard yesterday. We know from our police torture work, where we brought international human rights law to bear locally to make change. We know that we heard testimony from a number of commissioners globally about it had nothing to do with citizens. It had to do with human beings, right? People. What the cognitive dissonance was doing with regards to massive suicides for the guards, for the perpetuators, for the military members who are executing those orders and people. So I think that's important if it did not get entered into the record by our esteemed testifier. Thank you.
And the final question and statement is the weaponization of our citizen soldiers. The National Guard are our neighbors. They work right next to us. They have civilian jobs on a daily basis. And now they are being weaponized by this administration. The National Guard is who comes to our rescue during floods, during hurricanes. They come in helicopters to take people out standing on rooftops, and now they're being weaponized to come against the citizens that they are here to help. So the trust factor in our military is dissipating right in front of our eyes. And so how do we stop this progression towards martial law? We see the Insurrection Act, where the president can go ahead and send military troops in for whatever he deems his reason is when he establishes the Insurrection Act. The next step after that is martial law. That's the suspension of all freedoms, of all civil rights. The military takes over the government. As a civil military operations officer, when we go into foreign lands and we end up in taking over territory, we are assigned to govern those territories. And that's just what will happen here. And so how do we as citizens stop this process from escalating further to the point where we get to martial law? Because it's being, the pot is being stirred by the administration in order to make it happen. He's coloring the water and then says, I'm going to clean it up. That's a comment. And then the question is, how do we move as citizens to stop this progression? Thank you so much. And thank you, Mayor.
I thank my fellow commissioners for their thoughtfulness. And Dr. Arnold, you could have been here all day answering these questions. So thank you. You provoked a lot. Mayor Biz.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Carruthers, for the invitation. I'm so deeply appreciative that this conversation is happening. I think that the need for clarity and powerful voice articulating what has gone on in our communities is urgent, is urgent. I would never express any prejudice in favor of Evanstonians, but I do at least want to say a quick hello to Robin Ruth Simmons and Pastor Neighbors and Rick as well. And I was asked to speak this morning about the experience that Evanston has undergone and the effect that it's had really on our municipal government. I want to begin by acknowledging that as horrific as our experience has been, we've had it less hard than some communities, neighborhoods in Chicago, like for example, Humboldt Park and Little Village, and other municipalities like Cicero that were of course chosen because of the racial and ethnic makeup. But Evanston has had a very hard time as well. Throughout the so-called Operation Midway Blitz, on numerous days, there would be ICE and CBP agents across town. They were doing one thing fundamentally, which is profiling people based on their race, the color of their skin, the language they speak, and the job they do, and then seeking to abduct them. They would hang out at the Home Depot simply because they thought it was likely that some of the day laborers who periodically congregate there may have been undocumented. They randomly and violently assaulted landscape workers for the same reason. Helicopters would fly low over the city, apparently just looking for lawns where there were landscape workers so they could radio down to the ground and the SUV could roll up and masked armed agents of our own government would jump out and tackle people and abduct them. This went on numerous days. And then on Halloween, when there were a number of incidents just like what I just described, they also began assaulting dissenters. A car accident occurred, we believe caused deliberately by CBP agents in an effort to retaliate against people who they thought were following them. A crowd formed and they attacked at least 3 people. You've perhaps seen video of this. Brutal, violent assaults of people for the crime of disagreeing and stating their disagreement. Those 3 individuals were taken, driven around, eventually taken to the FBI office in downtown Chicago, and then released again because, of course, they had done nothing wrong. They were told they weren't under arrest, by the way. Which is interesting. You're assaulted by a federal agent and then taken against your will into a federal law enforcement vehicle and then driven around away from your home against your will. If that isn't an arrest, it certainly is an abduction. So this is what we, like so many others across this region, endured throughout the months of September and October and part of November. It fundamentally transformed the texture of life in Evanston. Fundamentally. The most important thing, of course, by far, is that there are people gone. Parents, spouses, neighbors, breadwinners, taken away. There are also a lot of people who are scared to leave their homes, who on a daily basis were confronted with the choice of leave my home to earn a living, to enable myself to continue paying my rent and stay in my home, or stay home where I'd be safe from our own government. I want to both name that by far the most severe consequences were for individuals who were personally affected, who were abducted, who were assaulted, or who were in fear of that, or whose immediate relatives experienced or were in fear of that. But I also want to name that there were broad consequences. On Halloween, every single school child in Evanston had indoor recess because it wasn't safe to be outside because our government was there. Every first grader in Evanston went home that night and their parents had to explain to them why on a beautiful fall day it wasn't safe to be outside because their government was there with guns and masks. Every one of those families had to decide if it was safe to trick or treat that night. Many decided that it was not. I also want to stress that the texture of life changed in very moving ways. The community came together. People developed new structures and new organizations to keep one another safe. Parents banding together to patrol school at drop-off and pickup. Individual blocks putting together group chats to make sure that everyone on that block knew who was home and who wasn't, and so who could secret a landscape worker into their basement should our government show up that day. People in the community assigned zones that they would patrol with their whistles and their clipboards and their phones, just in case our government might be there that day. All of this, of course, is being done allegedly in the name of safety. So I want to say a word about that. First of all, we, like every single municipality in this country, take public safety extremely seriously. In the city of Evanston, we work hard on it every single day. We are proud of the fact that we're approaching a 3rd anniversary of having no homicides in the city of Evanston, thanks to the collaborative work that we do as a community. I'll be very clear, by far the single biggest threat to public safety in Evanston for these last 6 months has been ICE. The biggest threat to public safety in our community has been our own federal government, by far. I want to say a word about the effect that this has had on our police officers. First of all, on the days when ICE or CBP are in town, our police department is focused entirely on that, distracted from the work that they ordinarily do, trying to figure out how to navigate the impossible position of trying to keep our residents safe from federal agents who claim to be acting under the authority of federal law enforcement. I will also say that though obviously nobody is perfect, certainly I'm not, our police officers and our police department have done extraordinary work over the last number of years to build trust with the community, to reach out, to build relationships, to model de-escalation and humanity. And that has borne fruit. And the trust between our police department and our community has improved dramatically. And when alleged law enforcement officers come into the city and wreak havoc, don't de-escalate, but escalate, don't think about racial justice, but practice racial profiling, aren't meticulously trained, but instead are incompetent cowboys, not only does it harm our residents, but it creates a horrible impression that then damages the impression that many in our community have about what law enforcement is. And it undoes that work that we've been so diligent about as a city government, as a community, as a police department, in strengthening those bonds and building that trust. So it's been, I would say, a profound trauma for our community. It's the hardest thing we've undergone in my time, not only as mayor, but as a resident of Evanston for the last 20 years. It's brought us together like nothing else has. And right now, as the attention of these agents is elsewhere, as Minneapolis is undergoing far, far worse than we ever experienced in Evanston or even elsewhere in the Chicago area, we're bracing. We're bracing for what's next. We wake up every morning and look at our phones and wonder if today is the day. And people are remaining vigilant and ready and trained But I would be lying if I didn't say people are scared as well, because it's scary. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to share these thoughts. I really appreciate the work that you are doing to dig at the details and to communicate this information. I think our country is going through something perhaps more severe than it's experienced since the 1860s. And it will only be overcome in a way that is healthy and humane and sane if we all come together in solidarity and in knowledge. And your work to spread the truth is a pivotal part of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Bitch, and former Evanston Council member Robin Rue Simmons, I believe, has the first question of you. Robin, if you don't know, is the inspiring force behind reparations, not just in Evanston, but across the country and the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. Thank you for your remarks, for your testimony, and for the really extraordinary leadership that you're providing in our city. I've been watching you lead our city and protect our residents, and it's very difficult for all of us. And me personally, living in a very diverse part of town where my neighbors are concerned, but we all are. There is a ripple effect. It's changed the way we're all moving around the community. It's changed our relationship to government, of course. So it's been appreciated that you've been present. And we should all know that he's been directly in the face of ICE leader, his name
Gregory Bovino.
has frequented our city at least 2 times I'm aware of. So it's been quite hostile, very uncomfortable. I'm wondering if you could tell us more. I've been thinking a lot about how this has changed the relationship with our community engagement, with morale overall, in other areas of government. And so I know that in Evanston, we have a very active and vocal community. Have we seen this impact other areas of government and community engagement and our relationships to city council dealings and so on? Has there been a ripple effect in that way, in the way that the city is able to manage itself?
Yeah, it's an extremely interesting question, and I'd have to think a little bit about how to best answer it. A few things immediately come to mind. First of all, when these situations happen, they're chaotic, they're scary, and then you have these federal agents wreaking havoc and big crowds of people protesting and speaking out, which is important, by the way. And then the police are there trying to restore order and keep people safe. And there's every second is a tough judgment call, right? Every decision our police officers make in that moment is really, really hard, because it is both against our city ordinance and the state law and our moral fiber to assist ICE. And also it's important to keep residents safe. And that involves creating kind of stability and de-escalating the situation. But then that de-escalation can look to some like it's making it easier for ICE to do their job, right? And so there's a constant tightrope where I think in general, they've handled themselves very, very, very well, but there's constant tough in the moment decisions that are being second guessed by everybody at all times. And some of that has been positive in the sense that people see that our officers are really trying their best to serve the community, and the contrast that's so obvious is just there on display for all to see. On the other hand, there's always second guessing and there's nitpicking, and I think some of that has been challenging for the trust there. And then the other thing I would say is that, you know, this kind of assaults on the basic human rights and dignity and safety of our people has sometimes kind of brought a sense of priorities, right? Like maybe the intense emotional fights that we have about zoning decisions or which restaurant's going to go where, maybe they pale a little bit in comparison, and they help, we get a sense of perspective that we perhaps didn't get before. On the other hand, people are so on edge. We're all so emotional. I feel my own emotions are so heightened at this time, and I know that most Evanstonians feel the same way. And so that creates an opportunity for solidarity and togetherness, but it also creates a tinderbox where any kind of disagreement can flare up and become really, really tough. And so we're trying, and I as a leader in the community have been trying to steer us toward kind of solidarity and mutual understanding and empathy. But in these times of stress, everyone reacts in different ways, right?
Mayor Ritz, beyond ICE and and Border Patrol, which is Bovino's agency, does the city feel pressured to in any way adopt policies about DEI and other things with the threat of federal money being taken away?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously one of, the largest institution in Evanston is Northwestern University, which cut a deal with the Trump administration that I was critical of. And the administration's willingness to leverage funding and other threats to achieve policy outcomes is very, very well documented at this point. The attitude that I took after the election was, we're not going to pretend to be anybody who we aren't. We are the city that created the first municipal reparations program in the country. We're not going to, it's not who we are to try to pretend not to believe in that, nor would anybody believe. No, it's just not credible. And so we've moved forward advocating for our values and our basic principles as a community, knowing that there could be another shoe to drop. And so, we've been monitoring federal revenues closely. There's been different outcomes for different specific federal revenue streams because this whole thing is completely chaotic and disorganized. And I expect it's going to continue that way. But we just felt from the beginning that pretending to be something other than what we are in order to try to get them off our back would be dishonest. It would be probably unsuccessful. And I certainly believe to my core that it would lead us down not us Evanston, but us America, down the path to the exact outcome that all of us in this room are desperate to avoid. I think cutting deals and keeping your head down and hoping they won't notice you is exactly how fascism succeeds.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for your testimony. A question, since we've been hearing all day yesterday and again today and from yourself, because illegality is a norm now. Human rights, dignity, civil rights are all being broken. There is no checkpoint, there is no guardrail. Different from the civil rights movement that Dr. King always had the government to try to reach out to their moral center to try to correct things. But now the government is the one that is being the villain and breaking the rights. So there's no entity to reach out to beyond the filing of lawsuits and the rest. But I think what you said is the coming together and the masses of people coming together is going to be the only alternative in turning this thing around. How you as mayor see the dealing with the black-brown division, and this narrative that has been very, very creatively done by the government and many others, that all the immigrants and illegals, and they're taking everything from the black community, and once again causing us to fight over crumbs with one another, and while those at the top continue to have the pie, dealing with the black-brown division, as well as an underlying current for all of this is white supremacy rules over justice.
Yes.
And so how do you see, and as a mayor of a city or a village, that we can do to attack this white supremacy, which I think overrules values, morals, and right and wrong, and this black-brown division, or have you seen that?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for the question. And in thinking about the way you introduced the question and talking about, that we can't appeal to the government because the government is the problem. Of course, you're right. And also I was very moved by something that Dr. Arnold reminded us of, which is that the government reports to the people. And when we can appeal to the people, we are appealing to the people. That is where the resolution of all of this must come from. And I mean that both in a technocratic elections sense, but also in a movement sense, that we need a movement of people rising up across this country to demand something different. History shows us that authoritarian regimes are toppled that way, and only that way. You know, of course, you're exactly right that there's been an artful effort to divide marginalized communities, pit them against each other, while those at the top benefit as a direct result of that. I think it has to be said, and it's a little bit awkward for me to say this, with folks like Pastor Neighbors and Robin here in the room, that leadership has been the solution to this in Evanston, that leaders in the Black and Latino communities have been speaking up in really moving and beautiful solidarity throughout this. And, I think about the NAACP dinner that occurred really just after the height of all of this awful stuff. And it was a beautiful expression of solidarity. Speaker after speaker was clear about the way that attacks on people because of their race, whether or not they're Black, are of a part of the ideology and the mentality and the sickness that has oppressed Black people in this country for centuries. And so I've been very, very, very moved and appreciative of the way that moral leadership in the Black and brown communities in Evanston, even as there's understandable frictions and tensions and challenges that are real and rooted in real mistakes that we as a city make sometimes, the community leaders have understood the way that solidarity needs to be at the root of the solution here, and they've done really, I think, important work.
This on?
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor Biss, for being here. And I want to follow up on my question from earlier related to accountability. And I know that you are in a unique position in so many ways. So I want to ask you about the violence you personally experienced and witnessed at Broadview at the hands of ICE agents initially, and now the violence that is being done by the Illinois State Police, including and adjacent to that, some of your own police force has been accused of cooperating with ICE. So when you bring all of that together, how do you as a leader, as the mayor of a city in Cook County, where the Cook County sheriffs have been part of the violence being perpetrated on nonviolent protesters at Broadview, you've had personal impact because of that? And then what has been the impact on you as a leader? And have you been able to be a part of any kind of accountability at any level for any of the violence happening?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, pardon me, I will say that the bulk of my time at the Broadview Center was prior to the state police being deployed. So most of what I experienced was what I could only characterize as truly gratuitous violence perpetrated by ICE. It was by no means the worst thing I saw there, but the moment that really explained to me what was going on was a time that a group of us were standing for those of you who know the layout, just back, it was back when the illegal security fence had been erected by ICE, and we were standing just north of that fence, just milling around. I mean, calling it protesting would be an exaggeration. Just milling around, kind of chit-chatting. And there were two sniper guys on the roof of the building itself, and they were just shooting pepper balls at us like target practice, like a video game or something. And again, it was fine. It was no big deal compared to a lot of other stuff that happened there. But it was an illustration of how gratuitous, how much a kind of expression of domination and contempt this entire operation was. These issues are very, very tricky. I will say that I think that Greg Bovino was playing a political game when he thanked the Evanston police for cooperating. I think he was trying to sow division and distrust. I witnessed a very pointed conversation between our police chief and Greg Bovino. Not only did I have a pointed conversation with him, but so did she. And I felt that in a really difficult situation, our police handled it, those tough calls well, and were not assisting ICE, though they were trying to keep protesters from being assaulted and, God forbid, worse. One thing that we've done that has been successful is we put in place a policy just before the worst episodes, that said, listen, if there's a 911 call that an alleged crime is occurring, whether it's an assault or abduction or what have you, we're going to send a police commander, and they're going to investigate like any other situation. And the thing about the car accident that happened on October 31st is we have a very kind of standard protocol for investigating and doing accident reports. And so we did that. Well, the consequence of that is that these ICE agents gave our police officers their driver's license, and their names are in a police report that's subject to FOIA. And so now journalists have been digging into the pasts of these individuals. In a world where most of these guys are masked and anonymous, to have their names be a matter of public record is an important step toward accountability. It may be a small step, but it's an important step, and I'm proud that our police department was able to effectuate that.
I think we have time for one more.
I think you have been a remarkable mayor, and I was just wondering, who else did you speak with in government? Did you talk to your state rep, state senator, U.S. congressperson, your U.S. senator, to ask them what are they going to do about what's happening in Evanston? It seems like mayors are kind of isolated. Did you talk to the governor?
Yeah, thank you for that. I have talked to my congresswoman, to Senator Durbin, to Governor Pritzker, and really tried to brainstorm with them, frankly, about what we might do differently. And I've been deeply moved, I will say, to have outreach from elected officials, primarily at the state and local level across the country, who've just said, hey, listen, we saw what you've been up to in Evanston. Can you help us? And we're a small city with a small staff, but there's a member of our staff who has been on, at this point, probably dozens of calls with state and local officials across the country saying, here's what we did, here's what we researched, here's what we considered and didn't do, here's our advice for you. I'm on a group chat with mayors across the country. We're all struggling. I wish I could pretend that we know the answers. We're struggling through this, we're groping through this, but we as a city stand ready to collaborate with anybody, to share ideas, to steal ideas, to borrow ideas. And I do think, I know I've said this word many times, it probably sounds like a cliche at this point, but I think solidarity is pivotal here. We all have to work together given what we're up against.
Who heads the U.S. Conference of Mayors? It seems like at this point, mayors need to be pulled together, not just on a little group chat. They need to have an official convening of those mayors who are under attack and the states where they're under attack. I mean, we can't do the Long Ranger thing. They have a national plan targeting certain cities.
I'm going to be extremely direct in my response to that. The associations have a lowest common denominator tendency, right? They tend to operate by consensus. And so if 90% of the mayors in the US Conference of Mayors are of the same point of view that I have, and 10% have the opposite point of view, it's very, very hard for the organization to move. And so that's why some of these more informal networks have been important. Because there isn't consensus, let's be honest. And if you'll forgive a partisan moment here, the Democratic Mayors Association has been a very important voice because there's essentially unanimity there, and the ability to make clear, strong statements and have convenings that allow for kind of ambitious idea sharing.
Okay, I said one last question, but I would be remiss if I did not let Reverend Neighbors say something to the mayor.
I am grateful for that. Thank you so much. Mayor, I appreciate your presentation today and the information that you have provided sort of piggybacks on Dr. Wilson's last question about the need for something to be done at a national level. I want to also refer to Robin Ruth Simmons. HR 41, I think, was introduced to Congress in the 1990s, and that was for reparations at a national level, Congressman John Conyers. It's still in Congress.
Yeah.
But locally, Robin Ruth Simmons decided we can do a reparations program in the city of Evanston. So I'm thinking about the mayor, and so much of what he said is local, how Evanston has responded to ICE and to this new federalization that we're undergoing. And I want to say that everything he talked about in terms of relationships, in terms of solidarity, he lives that out. So in our community on that Halloween day, when ICE literally attacked citizens 2 blocks from where I lived, I was probably among the first 15 people that arrived. I saw them actually snatching people out of their cars, a young woman putting their knee to her back and treating her violently. I saw them take guns out and point them directly in the face of people who were standing on the side. The mayor was right there. The chief of police was also right there, along with hundreds of other people. And when that was all over, the mayor and I were sitting on the steps of a house where this incident occurred, who happened to be a good friend of mine, the homeowner as well. And I want to say that we're talking about local relationships. We sort of both said, you know, we have to do something. We have to hold a vigil. We have to protest. And within hours, there was a press conference with probably 150 or 200 people. 24 hours later, there was a protest in that same intersection with 1,000 Evanston residents who came together to protest less than 24 hours. I don't know, I'm a preacher, so excuse me for cussing, what the hell is gonna happen at the national level. But I will tell you, you can get things done in your own local area. You can get things done in your own neighborhood. And that's where I think we have the power and the synergy to do something local that can then be modeled at a national level. And I think you've done a great job. So I don't have a question, but I wanted to just refer that what we're doing in Evanston and what is happening in other communities can be modeled at a national level.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mayor Piss.
Thank you very much.
Greatly appreciate it. I think we need a 5-minute break. And we will then continue. Ready to reconvene.
Let me switch positions real quick.
1, 2.
Yeah, so this is gonna be. Now this is gonna be, we'll call it, President Vermont. After you back, yeah, so these kids ready seated? Yeah, that's day two.
Tally.
I'm about the first. So I'm gonna come on.
We're ready. Not ready.
Okay, Madam
Set. Day two, truth telling, remarks and testimony.
We're gonna, oh,
Day two. Third session. Day two, truth telling, third session, testimonies and comments.
as I said at the start, we owe a lot today to Dr. Carruthers and McCormick. And I am honored to introduce the president, Reverend Handy.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to be here again for day two of the HART Truth-Telling Commission. This morning has already been deeply meaningful, insightful, and significantly important in the life of what's happening in our city, surrounding areas, and in this country. Bring you welcome again on behalf of McCormick Theological Seminary. We hope that the hospitality, well, I don't think we have to hope. The hospitality, I think, has been stellar and has been excellent. We give thanks to Dr. Mama, Queen Mother, Reverend Dr. Iva Carruthers for her leadership of the Center for Reparatory Justice, Transformation, and Remediation, and for gathering all of us here for these hearings. Very quickly, as I've listened to Mayor of Evanston and a few other folks this morning and have to step out again for a meeting at 11 a.m., I just wanted to share some remarks about the significance of strategic planning and action. Maybe this is from the perspective of a president, but I think it's also from the perspective of a minister, an activist, and a follower of revolutionary Jesus. It's very important that we keep asking these questions and responding to the need for strategic action. In 1989, I served as an intern for the Department of Paroles and Pardons for the state of Missouri. I was a senior in college and preparing for my first year of law school at Mizzou, and working for the first Black woman on that state board. And in 1989, I saw documents that came across my desk where the governor, John Ashcroft, we know who that is, who later became the Attorney General to George Bush, was prioritizing the building of maximum security prisons in the state of Missouri and privatizing them. And we know, of course, what happened after that. And he was not the only governor engaged in this strategic action in the 80s, but later, of course, mass incarceration exploded and a lot of pockets were fattened on the backs of modern day enslavement. And so I'm always asking the question, because there were persons behind closed doors who saw those documents like me. I'm a college student, I didn't know what I was looking at, right? Hindsight is 2020, I later understood what I was looking at. What documents are we not seeing now? We know we've seen the public document now, Project 2025. But there are documents, there are strategic plans that are happening behind closed doors right now that will impact what's happening, they think, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. I'll give you an example because I am always a futurist. I won't say a conspiracy theorist. We know that, for example, robotics has exploded. Robots are bartenders, they're delivering pizzas. We've seen them running around in the city of Detroit. And I'm not trying to be alarmist here, I'm just using this as an example, right? But what happens if those are militarized? And so I'm thinking, what kind of electromagnetic pulse device can be placed in the hands of citizens to deactivate that kind of technology? In 10 years, I hope ahead, I hope never, right? And so we need to be having those kinds of conversations so that we're not always just reacting to what's happening now. We're not always reacting to ICE, but what kind of really strong strategic action needs to happen? Because you have two options. Either you stop this now, what we're seeing in this nation, by any means necessary, right? Or you have a strategic plan for stopping what they're working on and plan to unveil in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? And it can't just be at this point responding to voter suppression. That's a piece of it, but we're hoping we have the right to vote. And so what kind of conversations can we have and what kind of strategic action is happening behind closed doors on both sides perhaps that can stop this onslaught of, I can't call it anything else, but just immorality and evil against American citizens and this attempt at global dominance by an oligarchy. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to your testimony and your witness. Thank you.
I'm pleased now to introduce Ben Ruddle, the attorney who is the criminal justice chair for the Illinois ACLU.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you all. My name is Ben Riddell. I'm the Director of Criminal Justice Policy for the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois, and just want to extend my profound gratitude and really humility to be in a room with such a group of esteemed faith leaders from around our city and the numerous elected officials like Mayor Biss and Attorney General Raoul, who spoke yesterday, who are really part of the work to push back against this onslaught of evil and immorality, as Reverend Handy put it. So a few things just about myself. I'm an attorney, but my main role at the ACLU is as a policy advocate and lobbyist on criminal justice issues. I've been in this role for about 10 years. Prior to that, I was a staff person working also in the Illinois General Assembly, primarily on criminal justice issues. And I'm since for about 25 plus years, a resident of the city of Chicago. I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, but I've lived in Chicago for now 25 years and about 10 years, going on 10 years in my current neighborhood of Albany Park, where I live with my partner. Albany Park, as you probably know, is a very diverse area on the northwest side of the city. and one of the many areas around the city that has been a locus of, I was going to say, immigration enforcement activity by the federal government, but as you know, has been discussed at length in this space, immigration enforcement is often the pretext for just generally sowing chaos, targeting communities and political recrimination against states like Illinois and cities like Chicago that the Trump administration has identified as its political adversaries and wants to punish. So I think most of you in this room are probably familiar with the ACLU as an organization, but I just want to say a few words about it. The ACLU is a 100-year-old civil rights and civil liberties organization that is active in all 50 states and works in the courts and in legislatures, in communities, and in the media to defend and protect civil rights and liberties and the Constitution and try to expand civil liberties even. We're a nonpartisan organization. We don't endorse candidates. We don't give money to candidates. We don't get funding from the government. And I feel the need to remind people of our, the nonpartisan nature of our organization sometimes because some legislators, as I said, most of my work is in the legislature, have a belief that we're a partisan, like a left-leaning organization or affiliated with the Democratic Party or something like that, which, couldn't be further from the truth. We have been, worked successfully over many years with members of both parties. Since Donald Trump has been on the scene, it's made that challenging because the diversity of ideas and thought within the Republican Party has disappeared, and now loyalty and obedience to Donald Trump has become the primary criteria, and the policies of Donald Trump are not always coherent. They're chaotic. But there are some common threads that run through those policies. One of which is greed and the personal self-interest of Donald Trump, but another big one of which is white supremacy and racism. And we saw that in the first Trump administration, and we're seeing it in spades in the second Trump administration. So my time at the ACLU included the whole first Trump administration. And so I can say that, when Donald Trump was elected, there were a lot of us people outside the ACLU who were not expecting that, and, who we had to react swiftly. And there were a lot of lessons learned from that first Trump administration. But one of the many lessons was not to be unprepared. And so I think back to yesterday's remarks from the Attorney General about the process that his office went through when it became apparent that we may be looking at another Trump presidency, and the preparation that they did. And I can say that in the ACLU, we went through a similar process of, reviewing what we could expect from the Trump administration 2.0 based on what happened in the first administration, based on documents like Project 2025 and the things that were being said, publicly and privately about what the plans were of some of the folks that, came to be in the second Trump administration. And really trying to game out scenarios for okay, the National Guard being one. We sat in many meetings where we discussed what are the different legal avenues by which the president can deploy the National Guard, and what are the levers at our disposal or the state of Illinois' disposal to try to resist that. And that's just one example. But I think about there's a quote that gets repeated a lot, and I heard it attributed to different people, like sometimes Mike Tyson or Muhammad Ali, that, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And the second Trump administration is kind of like that, where we knew it was a possibility that he would do things like try to deploy the National Guard, but it feels different when you wake up in the morning and the president has said, I'm deploying the National Guard to get the city you live in. And, it's action time. And so it's really, it's an all hands on deck moment. The ACLU, I'm proud of the work that we're doing, but it's not enough. Nobody, whatever victories we might have had in court, nobody should be taking a victory lap, because people have been harmed, are being harmed actively now. And, it's, I will tell you, the ACLU nationally has filed over 200 lawsuits to resist different actions of the second Trump administration. I know the Attorney General told us yesterday his office alone has filed 50 lawsuits. Those numbers are important. I can understand how, as somebody who's been personally impacted, would say, that's kind of meaningless, though, to my experience. And one thing I'll say about the numbers, the quantity of lawsuits, while that alone is not that meaningful, one of the reasons it's been important to file so much litigation is because I think one of the things that the Trump administration is doing differently the second time around is the overwhelming sort of flooding of the zone with new policies every day, sometimes 3 or 4 of them that are antithetical to civil liberties. And we all have limited capacity, all of us organizations, to do things like file litigation and pursue that. But part of the, without that resistance, these things will just move forward. And part of what they're doing is they're testing boundaries. They're seeing what they can get away with, what people will accede to based on the sort of threats of, we're going to take away your funding, we're going to deploy masked goons to your cities to harass and abduct members of your populace, and they've gotten some of the things they wanted done that way. But I'm just going to talk about a few of the things that the ACLU is doing here in Illinois. We're, privileged to be in a state where the elected leaders are pushing back against the Trump administration. I know from the work with all our other, ACLU affiliates, like I said, we're in all 50 states, red states and blue states. And so, not every state is like that. In some ACLU affiliates in red states, what they're really trying to do is mitigate the harmful impacts of policies that their state elected leaders are, cheerfully pushing forward to advance the goals and objectives of the Trump administration. And so that looks very different from a state like Illinois, where some of our elected leaders are really taking pride in trying to push back against that. So some of the things that we've done, a lot of what we've done is in the courtroom, litigation, because, even some of the other tools at our disposal, like legislation, you're going to end up in court with this administration, because they don't voluntarily follow laws necessarily. And anything that we try to do that they don't like, they'll initiate their own legal action or other pushback. So, we have supported the state's position, resisting the deployment of the National Guard to the city of Chicago. And that's been, successful in keeping the actual active deployment of the Guard from happening. The conditions at the Broadview facility, which was, never meant to be a detention facility. It was meant to be a short-term processing facility, but became a detention facility where people were denied room to sleep, food, water, hygiene, and really a place of suffering. And, the litigation that we've been part of to challenge the conditions there has resulted in, after much suffering by many people, that facility mostly being emptied out and no longer being used in the way it had been. The protesters at Broadview, who were attacked and subjected to excessive force by federal agents, we and our partners were successful in obtaining temporary restraining order against that activity, and which led to Greg Bavino skipping town for a while. I know he says he'll return, and I no reason not to believe him. But there are tools at our disposal to restrain these people that we will continue to make use of. One thing that's a little bit there's a consent decree that was initiated in the first Trump administration to restrain racial profiling in traffic stops, which was being done, in the first Trump administration, to racially profile people that officers thought might be Latino, make warrantless arrests, and subject people to immigration enforcement. And that litigation was initiated by the NIJC, the National Immigration Justice Center, ICER, other organizations. ACLU came in later as a co-plaintiffs counsel. But that consent decree has now been extended. And so we continue to have tools at our disposal to restrain the warrantless stops based on racial profiling of motorists for ostensibly immigration enforcement purposes. As I said before, my work is primarily in the legislature. And so there are numerous proposals out there that are, I think there's a great appetite by legislators to push back against the Trump administration and their excesses. And one of our goals there is to ensure that, while we support those goals, to make sure that the legislation we're passing is something that will hold up in court and that can be enforced. And I think, that brings us to the kind of, as I, mentioned at the beginning, my subject matter focus is criminal justice. And in fact, probably the reason I'm in this room, that I received an invitation to be here, is because of the partnerships that we've done with some of the other folks and organizations in this room, faith-based organizations that supported really generational, monumental criminal legal system reforms here in the state of Illinois, chiefly the end of money bail and the enactment of the Pretrial Fairness Act. And that is, something that has been under attack, certainly by Donald Trump and his ilk, but also by the greater part of the law enforcement establishment in this state. And, pushing back against misinformation and false narratives about Chicago as a lawless city and out of control crime have been a fact of life for us for the last 5 years. Since this passed, the law has been in effect now 2.5 years, is working well. Crime has not increased as the people, these folks said it would. And people are coming back to court. And about $140 million that was extracted from our communities via money bail is staying in those communities. So we're very proud of the leadership that Illinois has shown. But the Trump administration has criticized these reforms, to even, issued executive orders against so-called cashless bail states, really with Illinois in its crosshairs. And while, as I said, our Illinois legislators are not on the program of doing everything that Donald Trump wants, Trump's relentless beating of this drum and this narrative about Illinois and about Chicago and about crime has influenced media coverage, and it has, has put us in a position where we are going into this legislative session that just began, concerned that these narratives will take hold and that we'll see, you know, again, what was really a monumental, not just criminal justice, but racial justice initiative in the Pretrial Fairness Act and the other important reforms included in the Safety Act, that we'll see, you know, moves to roll those things back by people who may not be politically allied with the Trump administration, but may be breathing some of the air that contains these poisonous narratives. We expect to be continuing our vigorous defense of the Pretrial Fairness Act and trying to make sure that all the progress we've made here in Illinois is not taken away. Finally, I know, you know, time is at a premium here. We are really trying to create as many tools and opportunities to engage with communities and for communities to engage with us to make their voices heard in whatever way that is. You know, not everybody is a protest march person. So we want to supply people with as many tools as possible to make their voices heard, whether that's through town halls or letters to the editor or organizing their own events or activating groups that may be active already. And so, you know, we are more and more for that means going to different parts of the state, doing community education events, doing, you know, supplying people with tools and materials, talking points that they can use to push back in the ways that work for them against the you know, many different policies of the Trump administration that are impacting them and their loved ones and their communities in negative ways. So I know that's a very broad overview, and I hope it's been informative, and I hope I can provide answers to any questions you might have about the ACLU and the work that we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Your description was very complete. I guess I would focus on what you said your role is regarding criminal justice policy. And you talk about pretrial reform. And just to be clear, the idea behind it is the only people who should be locked up before they're convicted of a crime are those who either are dangerous or potentially a flight risk. And if the judge finds neither of those conditions, then they are not to be confined, basically.
That's a great, I think, summary. You know, basically, pretrial detention, incarceration, jailing is to be based on the court's determination of risk. It should never be based on how much money somebody can pay. That is a senseless way of determining that, and you know, that we did for way too long, and that other countries in the world don't really do. That's something, you know, a little known fact about money bond is that it's an obscure practice across the world. But unfortunately, it's the norm in the United States, and I couldn't be prouder to have, you know, played a small role in Illinois being the first state in the United States to completely abolish the use of money bond, and we're not going back.
So to what degree do you think there is a risk in the legislature of pulling back on that and other, you know, sentencing and all the other things that you probably focus your life on?
Well, I don't know what, but I know that we're in I know we're in a fraught environment where there's, you know, again, these narratives out there that may not be true, but that are compelling. And, you know, they're like, crime is still a unfortunate fact of life. We have way more of it in Chicago and violence than any of us want. And, you know, when something really horrible happens, as, you know, it recently did on the Blue Line, our opponents will do everything in their power to exploit those tragedies, to attribute them falsely again to, you know, reforms that have been enacted in the last couple of years. And so that's, you know, that's in the air. It's also an election year, and election years are always fraught times for criminal justice because there's a persistent idea that the way to win elections, at least for among some, is to paint oneself as being tough on crime, your opponent as soft on crime, and people propose policies that you know are you know old chestnuts that get you know introduced every year, but we you know take new forms of, like, if there's a behavior we don't like, we want to, it doesn't matter, it's already a crime, make it a more serious crime, and you know with the idea that you're going to get less of that behavior. And of course those of us who work in policy know that it's not that simple, it doesn't work that way. And actually sometimes you can create more crime if your only response is always you know more punishment. So, and this is not an impulse that is confined only to the Republican Party. This is a bipartisan thing. Both sides do it. It's, and so I wouldn't say that I'm not concerned that something, you know, could be proposed or even start to move through the system in a way that would provoke myself and our aligned groups to, you know, try to stop it, because we're in the circumstances are the type that can create criminal justice legislation that is not based on evidence or facts, but is based on lurid stories and people's political ambitions.
I have a question. Thank you very much, Attorney Riddell. I mean, ACLU has been for 100 years a very important organization, and I'm so happy that you have really, the organization, Illinois and nationally, has really met the moment, so to speak. I wanted to follow up on one of the things you said is, and it's kind of a follow-up of this one. One of the things that you said is one of the things that you do, which is to pay attention to state legislative policies. And you mentioned the fact that in Illinois, we're fortunate in many ways, but not all states are. What I'm wondering about, you have a very formidable opposition by way of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and I'm wondering, you know, we know that they they led the way in various legislation that reinforced these policies that you just spoke against around incarceration, for example. I'm wondering about their role today. Are they involved in any of this promotion of state legislation at the state level that's reinforcing some of these illegal policies that we're seeing?
You know, the short answer is I don't know the answer to that question. That I think I haven't paid attention to what ALEC is doing lately. I mean, as for those who may not know, they're kind of a, you know, national, like, conservative type think tank that creates these kind of template pieces of conservative legislation that then get replicated in all these states and introduced. And you know, we've seen examples of that over the years. And so I don't know, because ALEC doesn't have like a lobbyist or a representative. It's, these things get introduced through legislators or through other advocacy groups. And so it may well be that some of the bad regressive legislation that we see out there originated with ALEC, but I don't know that. But we certainly have no shortage of legislation that's been introduced primarily at this point by Republicans that would, you know, repeal the Pretrial Fairness Act, would roll it back, would, you know, to in various ways, and then other types of, you know, the what I would characterize as bad criminal justice legislation, penalty enhancements, you know, are a big one. You know, I couldn't say though for a fact whether or not that particular organization played a role in all these bad pieces of legislation that I have on my radar.
I have a question. Um, so we know that this administration has a very thin line between lawlessness and law enforcement, depending on who's committing the infraction. I'm curious about a lot of the legislation that has been passed around police accountability in the state, and I know you've been a part of that. And as you were talking, I thought about Sonia Massey, who was murdered in Springfield. And with this administration empowering ICE and other law enforcement agencies, can you talk more about if we don't stop what's happening, like your thoughts on how this will trickle over into Black communities related to law enforcement and how we will be impacted, um, and especially incidents like we saw with Sonia Massey. So how does this all interrelate?
Thanks. There's a lot, a lot there in that question. I think, Illinois has taken some steps on police accountability. The Safety Act included some things like that. There were also some important things that were left out that a lot of us wanted to see, like limiting the doctrine of qualified immunity that keeps police officers from being held accountable, even in cases of clear misconduct. But like to your, I think, broader question about law enforcement and abuses and what we can, what we might expect or fear as if things progress. As I mentioned earlier, like most of the law enforcement in this state was, vociferously opposed to things like the Pretrial Fairness Act. They were vociferously opposed to the police accountability provisions in the Safety Act and the other, measures that the state of Illinois has taken. And they have been, independent of Donald Trump, perpetuating misinformation and like fear-mongering narratives. And some of these law enforcement or law enforcement affiliated organizations have actually, expressed their approval of the Trump administration and the policies it's carrying out. And they're, feeling hamstrung and their hands being tied by things like the Trust Act that prevent them from collaborating with federal authorities and wanting to be unleashed to do that. And so, the sad fact is there are many people in law enforcement in this state that, but for the Trust Act and things, police accountability measures that restrain them, would like to be doing more in service of the Trump agenda. And I think that when we talk about things like in the veto session, we worked in collaboration with some of the leading immigration groups to try to restrain some of the worst abuses in terms of federal agents setting up shop at courthouses or daycare centers and arresting them there. And these are things that got lots of pushback from law enforcement groups that do advocacy in Springfield. And those of us who are trying to advance these policies had to ask ourselves, the bill says immigration civil arrests at courthouses. What happens if they defy this? Can we count on our Illinois law enforcement to enforce the Illinois law if the federal government is trying to do something different? And so I apologize for not giving a more like encouraging answer to like clear but I think I want to emphasize the fraught position that we're in terms of some of the influential law enforcement groups in Illinois, not necessarily being in agreement with a lot of us in this room about the abuses and excesses that are being perpetrated against us, and in fact feeling as though they're being improperly restrained from participating in that.
Just a quick question, just for a clarification, because before we were always told in all of our buildings that you needed a court order in order to enter the building. And we know as of just the last couple of days now, it says that ICE has a mandatory that they can go in and homes and the buildings without a court order. Can we stop that or not?
I, I have seen that, and it's incredibly alarming. And I'm just going to be perfectly transparent about my lack of kind of expertise to provide what I think would be an informative answer that people can rely upon. So I think it's something that's just a threat that's just emerging, but it's like nothing in the current law. This is, this is a new power that they're claiming. This is not something that that they're on solid legal ground, but in claiming, I think, but they're claiming it, and so what's on solid legal ground is not always, or often the last word for this administration. So I think it's something we need to take very seriously, and I'm positive it's something that the ACLU is looking at. I just haven't personally been involved in those conversations enough to be confident to say like what the immediate response is or should be.
I'd like to say two things. I want to respond to Father's quick piece. In Evanston, we've had workshops for the past 3 months alerting houses of worship that ICE is allowed to go into their house of worship. That's what we've been instructed by also the local police department. But they are not allowed to go into areas that have been designated for authorized personnel only. So if you have a worship service and it's open to the public, they can come into that worship service, but they cannot arrest anybody that you may place into a room that says authorized personnel only unless they have a judicial warrant that has been signed by a judge. So that's information we've been teaching for the last few months. But I want to say something outside of that. I'm a parent of a student at Morehouse College. And Dr. Willis just showed me something that came across her phone, and it's on my phone now as well for all parents. HBCUs today have received threats of potential shootings on campuses, and Morehouse has received that threat as well. And my son is 22 years old, and my daughter, who teaches at Georgetown, is on the campus of Morehouse today because she's going to be giving a panel discussion. So I want to say all of that to say, and ICE is on the way, and ICE is on the way to Morehouse as well. So I want to say all of this to say that I think that it seems as if our country has gone to hell in a handbasket because the rule of law has been placed to the side by our current administration. And when I hear lawyers that are talking, and I greatly respect what you're doing with ACLU, the big question is, who has confidence in the law anymore? Who has confidence that we can appeal to our legislative system, our judicial system, so that our rights will be respected, because everything is seemingly going to hell in a handbasket? And here I am now at this important truth-telling commission, worried about my 27-year-old and 22-year-old, like so many other parents are worried about them as well. So how do you appease our worry and concern based upon your perspective with regard to the legal system?
Well, unfortunately, I can't entirely appease it because the threats are very real, and I would be lying to you if I said I can give you reassurance, because we've seen so many of our democratic institutions fail recently, and we've seen the checks and balances that are supposed to restrain these types of abuses fail, and our courts have not always been willing to step in and restrain these things. And the question that really, I think all of us who work for the ACLU, when we speak at these kind of events, the thing that we get asked that we sometimes have no good answer for is like, okay, what happens when the courts do step in and and then the administration disregards and disobeys a court order? Who's gonna and I wish I had an answer to that question that would provide reassurance, but I think unfortunately I don't. I think it's up to all of us to do everything we can to try to reinforce, restore, rebuild these institutions and create some accountability where there is none.
You said no? Oh, somebody else?
Yeah, I just think that we're in a state of emergency. And you can't just sit down and say, this is what my little group can do by themselves. We are being attacked by a system, organized, and we must convene. All the lawyers are not working together. ACLU's over here with a fire. Who else are you all talking to? Because this is not just a policy issue. This is an abuse of power. And there, I don't know, have you all filed any lawsuits against Pam Bondi and the rest of those nuts in the Justice Department?
Yes. The ACLU has filed over 200 lawsuits nationwide against the Trump administration to try to restrain various abuses. And those are not just things that the ACLU is doing on our own. We have partners and collaborate. So, some of the litigation I was talking about here in Illinois is done, in collaboration with the leading immigration justice organizations. There's some nationwide litigation we've been involved in. One of the things I didn't mention is the Trump administration has tried to gut the Head Start program, one of the most successful government programs that anybody could name, based on this anti-DEI, business. And that is some litigation that the ACLU, in collaboration with a lot of other organizations, has helped to restrain that and protect the Head Start program. So I would just, in a very friendly and respectful way, push back on the idea that we're on our own, because I think that it is, you're right, we are under attack. What was said in the previous discussion with Mayor Biss about the need for solidarity is so true. And so I think, it's a time when we need to lead where we can lead, and in the areas where somebody else is the expert, we need to not step back, but step up and follow and be part of the solution. It's not a time for competition or duplication of efforts. It's a time to add value and find our people and be in solidarity with them, because it's going to take all of us.
Just a quick question. So before we had ICE, we had the Klan was still in place. Not the Klan, I'm sorry, the FOP. But that's what I was thinking. Same thing. And we know that the FOP was a problem already before all of these things started. What can we do to address our local FOPs and the problem that they pose to us in this moment?
That's a great question. I think, I know that the first time that Donald Trump ran for president, the FOP actually endorsed his candidacy. I'm not sure if they're still like that vocal, but it's, it speaks to the fact that, like, the city of Chicago, where I think Trump got something like 12% of the vote, the police union, for all the police officers that, are supposed to be protecting and serving all of us, are on the part of an organization that has endorsed Donald Trump. And I don't think that if you look at the police unions outside of Chicago in Illinois, you're going to see anything different, And so I wish I had an answer. I mean, we certainly talk to the FOP about like policy initiatives that we have and that they have in Springfield. And I mean, we are believers in, in talking to everybody and trying to make inroads. But, in terms of the positions that they've taken and their orientation to the current administration, there's there are real concerns there, and I just don't, I think that we need to just, we need to continue to try to find opportunities for finding common ground and collaboration and, open and respectful debate. But we're a far cry from, that in a lot of regards. And that's just the reality.
Thank you so much for your time and comments.
Let's, I'm gonna move you. There you go. There you go. Stand by. Feel free. This is a live mic. Who's ever speaking, you can just slide that to left or right. Not close, do not lean into it. We're gonna this.
Thank you.
Okay, that'll take you full form. You wanna student? How about you? Comfortable?
Yeah.
No, that's Mitchell.
So again, feel free to, I'll get you.
Can we just keep it there? I believe.
No, please follow my, with your water. There you go. And just speak to that. And speak to that. Any idea who's speaking first?
So that's this. Follow my instructions.
Don't worry about it. Oh, like, don't worry about it.
Okay, I think we're going to get started.
Yeah, I have one. Was there some? Yeah. Do you mind if it's in your name?
No.
Your name is Celeste Mitchell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they said there's been some flops. I'm ready. You ready?
Nervous? I got it. Yeah.
Ready? Good morning.
Morning.
We've heard a lot in the last day and a half about big picture from officials about what is going on in policy. We haven't heard a lot from people who are impacted. So I am so glad to introduce Infinity Gant and Celeste Mitchell, who have lived through what's going on the south side of Chicago. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Celeste Mitchell, and I'm a member of Southside Together. And I was a tenant of the 7500 South Shore Drive. It was in the middle of the night on September 30th. I'm sorry for crying. On September 30th, 2025, I was watching TV when I heard booming outside my door. My TV was kind of loud, so I thought it was somebody doing something in the hallway. So I didn't think much of it. It happened so fast. I asked who was it, and 4 Iceman agents came in with big AK-47s, pointed at me and my nephew, which is 10 years old. He was scared. He was sleeping at the time. So he woke up. We didn't have time to grab nothing. It's like, what would you do if 4 men came in your house and had guns pointed at you? They was cursing at us. They took us outside. It was flash bombs going off, helicopters in the sky. We was all scared and just confused. It was cold outside. We couldn't even ask questions about what's going on. We was in zip ties. They even blocked out the streets where we could not leave and our loved ones could not come to help us. They put us in buses. They had us detained for hours. The whole night was surreal. They had no compassion for us and they acted like they were happy to do the raid. They treated us like nothing. I've never seen anything like it in my life. They acted like they were in the army and they would treat me like I was a criminal. It was embarrassing. It was scary. It looked like a drug raid straight out of a movie. A few days later, I went down south to be with my family. So I had nowhere to go. I stayed a few months. When I came back to nothing. The building had been shut down. All my things were stolen. I'm financially devastated because I have to start all over. I've never been homeless in my life. I've always had a place to call my home until now. I can't stay with my nephew or my son because of our living troubles. I'm paying for transportation for everybody to get back and forth to school. I got a son that's 17 years old. He's a senior at Hyde Park High School. This is his senior year. It's an extra hassle with money, and on top of it all, it happened around the holidays. It was the most terrible holiday we ever had. Like, you take things for granted, like coats, shoes, and boots. My nephew has to be near the building, has to still see the building because he go to school right across the street at Powell School. He's scared. He always talk about how he don't want to look at that building anymore. And I don't know if I ever recover this, but I surely won't forget it. That's all I have to say.
That's extraordinarily enough.
Hello, everyone. My name is Infinity Gant. I am an organizer at Southside Together, and I organized with Celeste at 7500 South Shore. So the building was in disrepair before ICE had come, but nobody was paying attention to it because, you know, it's Black and brown people living in the building. It's fine, right? But ICE comes in and now it's a big show. They have cameras. This is like they're filming a movie. Neighbors are seeing that there's helicopters around and it's lights, it literally lights, camera, action, right? So the people who were impacted were devastated. A lot of people haven't seen their neighbors since. Some people got falsely arrested and, you know, they got released, but again, hard to reconnect. And from ICE being, like this raid being so popularized, the city started paying attention to the building. So now the disrepairs in the city, in the building are beginning to, the city officials are beginning to take notice. And so now the building goes into foreclosure court, where, you know, we're having inspectors come in to see that there were problems before that have now been exacerbated, right? Because ICE came in kicking in doors. They came in like bursting locks. So people are getting their stuff stolen, and like other people know that the locks don't work and stuff like that. So outsiders are now coming into the building. Yeah. The neighborhood, right? There are reporters coming in to interview people. A lot of tenants who we talked to felt like they were treated like zoo animals. People are just coming in, they want to get a story, they want to talk about ICE, they want to, you know, and it was very dehumanizing for a lot of people. And so after all of this is happening, it's in foreclosure court, and the city decides to shut the building down. The building, they decided to move people out in 2 weeks, right after Thanksgiving. Right before Thanksgiving, people were notified, and they had to be out of the building maybe a week or two after Thanksgiving. And so we organized. We got the tenants to come together to say, hey, can we at least have decent living conditions while we're here? Can we get some help relocating? This is 2 weeks. A lot of people are on Section 8 or the voucher, and like it's a whole process. You have to do inspections. You have to like there's this legal process that you have to do. For a lot of other people, you know, you need the money. There's move-in fees, there's security fees that you have to pay. People have children, you know, stuff like that, right? So we, you know, came together to advocate for human rights, right? We just want to make sure that this is right before winter time, right? It snowed. It was freezing. There's no heat in the building. Cold outside, flash mobs, no heat in the building. And so we were just trying to make sure that the effects of ICE coming in were being paid attention to, and people were willing to help the people who were impacted. Unfortunately, we did not get more time. The tenants still had to move out in 2 weeks. Also, unfortunately, the court was giving a list of tenants who were on a lease, but it wasn't accurate. So some of the people who were on a lease still didn't get money from the yeah, what was I'm blanking on the word, it's something with an R. But anyway, the company comes in, you know, when the old property managers lose the building to help with relocation and things like that. But, right, Celeste was a receiver, yes, I know it's something with an R. But yeah, so the documents weren't accurate because again, the property managers weren't doing their job before ICE came in. And now it's coming out that the property managers are the one who called ICE. They're taking money from the new arrivals, and this was an eviction process. This was a violent eviction process. You know, the Obama Center is coming into the neighborhood. It's blocks away. This building is right across the street from the lake. It's prime real estate, right? And you know, today we've been hearing a lot about the policing of ICE and like that police violence. But I think in this example, we see how this is now being used in other situations like housing, right? ICE has impacted a whole building worth of people who had to move in 2 weeks, children who were living across the street.
Children wearing zip ties.
And traumatized, right? Like her nephew who lives across the street has to look at that building every day, and memories come back every day. And it's hard to transfer. It's hard, you know, like, and so I am glad that we are able to come here today and talk about this and talk about the extended impacts of ICE, you know, brutally terrorizing citizens, right? A lot of people haven't recovered. A lot of people are homeless now.
Because ICE.
because of ICE. And I think sometimes when we think of homelessness, we think of shelters or, you know, living on the street. But if you don't have a lease in your name, if you have to live with cousins or live with family or things like that, that is considered homeless. And most of the tenants are homeless because even still, they can't find apartments. Even still, it is hard to get relocated.
We only had 14 days to get out. By the time I came back from the incident with ICE, I had nothing to come back to. Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think it is important to highlight how, yes, like ICE is in the streets and, you know, we have to pay attention to different locations that they could potentially be at. And we have to pay attention to, you know, how we go about our days and things like that. But as we just spoke about, like, they're coming into homes, right? Like it's terrorizing. And so, yeah, it's brutal and hard to recover from. And so right now we're on the path to recovery. Yeah.
Thank you so much to you both. I know I can speak on behalf of everybody sitting here, how much we appreciate you coming in and saying it. And one of the things that I'm wondering when you talk about the recovery, an 8-year-old boy lives through this, that's going to be lasting in his head for the rest of his life. I mean, that you can't erase it. So are there services addressing psychological, how to help the people who've been through it?
No. So our org Southside Together, we organized, right? So when we found out that ICE had come to the building, we went to the tenants to talk to people about what happened and like next steps, right? We found out that the building was in court for foreclosure. And so we were trying to make sure that the tenants knew about that they, you know, knew the link to join the court call, that they were able to speak about their experiences and things like that. But a lot of people weren't living there anymore because there was no heat and their doors had been kicked in. There was also like puddles of water.
Damage, flies in the building.
Yeah, and pests. Yeah. So again, the building was in poor condition before,
It was a place you call home.
and ICE came in. ICE came in and ruined that. And so what we have been able to accomplish through organizing, we were able to get the mayor to speak out on this. We were able to get him to try to talk to the judge and say, hey, people need more time. But that wasn't enough. Like that didn't even give us more time. We were able to go to the news and like make sure that we got coverage on it. And we were able to, you know, get people some extra money, which, you know, is better than what they would have been left with before. But no, we haven't been able to get, you know, the social services that we need for people, like getting housing. We've even had like meetings for people where they could meet from people with from like Department of Human Services or from Atlas Realty to get apartments and stuff, and still that wasn't enough. So we do at Southside Together, we have a donation link. So you can donate at southsidetogether.org/donate. But again, like that still has to be split between 40 people. And so even $20,000 becomes a few hundred very easily. So yeah, it's been hard.
And it's the only organization that's helping us that I know of.
Thank you for your testimony. It's a riveting discussion about people who have been impacted by this. Now, the fact is that it was ICE immigration, what was the complex of the building? What was the tenant composition of the building itself?
I mean, if the living situation, sometimes the elevator didn't work, you know, things just watch things. But when they kicked in our doors, came in and caused all that chaos, flash bombs going off, you don't know what's wrong, people pointing guns at you. At 11 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning, you outside on a bus cold with your kids in zip ties.
Yeah.
It's traumatic.
How much was it,
Well,
do you think, were like new arrivals versus people who lived in Chicago?
What you mean?
Like,
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was probably 10 immigrants that had moved in up on the 5th floor
Okay.
because the building was kind of run down a little bit. But they was locking up everybody. It didn't matter. They checked everybody, put everybody in zip ties, kids too.
Mhm.
It wasn't like they just, you know, isolated, just them looking for it, knocking on the door or standing around the perimeters. No, they just came in kicking in your door.
Thank you.
It was a raid.
yeah.
No, it wasn't nothing compassionate about it.
And the building was primarily black and brown. It was primarily black with like a few Latinx
No,
sprinkled
in and
in.
out.
Yeah.
I have a question if nobody else. Thank you both. I just can't tell you how painful it is to hear what you're saying and how real. And I want to say it feels like your human rights were violated long before ICE got there in terms of the condition of the building. And I hope that we can all do more with the city to hold building owners and managers accountable, because unfortunately your story is not unique in terms of the condition of the building and how you were treated as tenants. And so for me, I think, we keep wondering how we can make a difference. And I think all of us here in Chicago can put way more pressure on whatever arm it is in the city that holds accountability at that level for conditions of buildings. No one should have to live in a building like what you lived in. So I want to put that out there. My question is related to whether or not you and other tenants are a part of any lawsuits because of how clearly your constitutional rights were violated.
Nobody has reached out to us but Southside together.
Oh,
This is the only place that I know that helped us out and keep helping us to stay in touch with us, see how we doing.
okay. And I'm not suggesting that a lawsuit is gonna, take
Yeah.
care of all of the things you're experiencing every single day. And I do think there has been some success in the courts where eventually there could at least be at least accountability and maybe some kind of restoration. And so I think that's an important question.
Yeah. And I think to the question, a conflict that conflict is not the right word, but I think something that we are seeing is that the court isn't always on the tenant side, right? Like the building went to foreclosure court. We got the inspections. They knew the building was bad and the solution was to shut it down. And the judge, like her reasoning was that it's unsafe. And she said that in her, right mind, she could not allow tenants to live there. It was a fire hazard, things like that, which is true. And the tenants are now responsible for something that was out of their control. Like it wasn't their responsibility to get the heat turned on. It wasn't their responsibility to make sure. in the elevators and things like that, right? So I think sometimes even when we are talking about like, oh, we should go to the courts, like we should, you know, do a lawsuit and things like that, we have to be honest and like recognize that the laws aren't always looking out for the people who are most disenfranchised. And so, yeah, I think we are now trying to make sure that we are bringing awareness to that, right? And highlighting like maybe we do need some new laws, maybe we do need some new practices to make sure that stuff like this doesn't happen. Because to your point, this is not new, this is not surprising. We've had conditions like this often.
Your story is really troubling to me because there's so many agencies that should have stepped up once it was on television. That's the first thing. You do have legal remedies. You all have tenants' rights. You, and so I don't know who represented the tenants in the court case. There should have been a lawyer representing all of the tenants because the owner of the property has to repair the harm that you've already experienced, and it's not too late, I don't think, to do something about that. So we're gonna look into it. Secondly, this whole ICE raid, they had no legal authority to go into the building in the first place. So we have to raise that issue as well. And then we need to collectively, all of us can figure out how to help repair some of the harm that you have experienced from the government and from the community. And so on behalf of a lot of people, I don't even want to call their names, I apologize that you have endured this and there has not been a public outcry from all of us. This is unbelievable. And you now are still homeless in spite of everything that is going on. And I think that is an indictment on our silence as a body of people. We're so busy being busy, we're forgetting how, the impact of all of this stuff has on ordinary, everyday people who don't know where to go, who to go to, how to go to. And I want to thank Southside Together for doing what you could do, but it's so much more that we can do with you. And this is just, I mean, this is unimaginable. I am just alarmed and hurt. With all the churches in this city, we can help you get a place to stay. That's number one, and give you some money and some food. And we feed people every day that we don't know, that have not endured this. So I don't want to take up much more time, but I'm just alarmed at myself and all of us in this room. And so we're gonna help you. I promise you.
Can I just comment on that? Or go on with what you just said, Rohit? I mean, I know what I can do about 40 families, but I don't know your situation right now, and where you're at, or if you're homeless, or if you need help. But I feel, at least, besides listening to what you have to say today, I want to, and I presume other people at the table would like to help you, at least. I don't think you should just come here and listen and we hear it and then we say, okay, I'm sorry you're in this position. We're going to document this. But I'm willing personally, and to St. Sabina, and if there's others here, I want to make sure you have a place to stay. I can't help 40 people, but we can take care of you. So I'll give you my information. So.
After Reverend Jamar, may I share something after Reverend Jamar?
I have one question. What ward is this?
7th.
Who's the older person?
Greg Mitchell.
All right, thank you.
If I, no, keep going. So that question was, did CHA come out? I know that if we run out of time, one of the things that was established was that we can read the questions into the record and then you all can send feedback back as you may. I'm sorry, I'm looking at you and I'm just, so I wanted to say thank you, first of all, as so many others have. You know, the role of the commissioner, I'm sure that our chair, Dr. Iva Carruthers, the conveners, you know, will probably read that into the record before all of this is over. And as it is, truth telling. It's your story. It's not for anybody here we have to be impartial. But we have to be impartial, but I've been doing a lot of sharing, and I thank my fellow commissioners for allowing that as well. So I just wanted to say we see you and we feel you, both of you. Thank you for the work that you're doing as far as organizations are concerned that are stepping up in this void that is what has to happen. Thank you for just standing, and being strong. So in the real scheme of things, I know it's also frightening to come through because you could be targeted, right? Or you can be retaliated against. So I think most of my fellow commissioners don't know that, well, you probably do know, being on this side of the table is a major risk as well. Like the organizers that convened it, the individuals also. So just so you know, why I'm feeling your testimony so personally is, number one, just like my phone just started blowing up with, some other alerts about ICE coming to a couple of HBCUs in Atlanta as we speak. My phone started blowing up on that day, and I was out of the country, totally different time zone, so it's middle of the night. And when I looked at it, everybody's asking me, "Are you okay?" I knew that meant something was happening in Chicago, like something crazy. And now to hear the story from a directly impacted mother who is still experiencing the after effects. So I'm sorry, let me wrap it up.
Okay.
But part of my role, well, the last time I sat as a commissioner, as a jurist, it was for a tribunal on the 70th anniversary of the We Charge Genocide work, historic We Charge Genocide work. It was in the Audubon Ballroom, which is now the Betty Shabazz Center, where Brother Malcolm X had his life taken for saying this is a human rights issue. It's a human issue. It's not about civil laws. It's not about local and national laws. So the retaliation that has come since then includes my home being fraudulently sold while I was taking care of my husband in the last few weeks of his life. And like you said, when I showed up a few weeks later after I was given the documents to bring him home, his crematory ashes is empty. So I understand, and we got you, we got each other. That's all I can say.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
And are we breaking for lunch? 5 minutes. 5 minute spiritual break.
God bless you.
Thank you.
Beautiful job. Thank you. Good. You did a great job. Thank you.
I want to just thank you for your leadership, for showing up, but now stay encouraged. And thank you, dear. I'm definitely figure out how to help. So I imagine Mama.
Thank you. We're crying on set.
You can tell. Everybody was so shocked. What? We want to do
But I can get this afternoon. I can get. You're staying in somebody's house. I learned that myself the hard way. But we can do that today if there's a way for that. Here. So then today and then if she help find an apartment. Organizing is, I'm sorry. The city didn't help at all. No, not the mayor saying something. They have tremendous. So him staying in front, great.
Section 5.
One more time. Do you mind if I turn this on, please?
Day 2, truth telling, section 5.
And don't move until when you're done, I'll call. Release you, okay? Good deal. Listen. Good. We'll just scoot up first. Okay, all right. Don't touch the microphones, they'll pick you up just fine. So.
Before we begin, I think Reverend Keller would like to say a few words about the differences of the armed forces.
Thank you, everyone. In our earlier discussions, we were talking about the Insurrection Act and martial law. But one of the things I just want to clarify is when we talk about posse comitatus, the law, it addresses the Army and the Air Force, which are pretty much land-based. Doesn't talk about the Navy and the Marine Corps. So, we need to be mindful of that as well. The Navy is on the water. Understand that the Marine Corps is the expeditionary force of the Navy. I just thought we needed to make that known. So if you see any movement by Marine Corps, we know what's, pay attention to that. Thank you.
The idea of Marines invading our cities is shocking, right? With that, I'd like to welcome the Reverend Sandra Castillo of the Episcopal Diocese. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I am very deeply grateful to all of you for organizing this event and compiling this information. It is essential that we document what is happening here across the country, how it's impacting individuals, destroying the lives of individuals, and we are much better than that. I am going to just give you a brief explanation of what we do. I am the canon of Migration Ministries for the Diocese, Episcopal Diocese of Chicago. In 2019, our convention voted to become a sanctuary diocese. We have a resolution that sets out the parameters of what we do. It's very broadly worded. And our diocese goes from the Wisconsin state line to Springfield, the Indiana state line to the Iowa state line. So it's a lot of geographic area. So I'm going to let you know specifically issues that I have observed or heard from or people have spoken to me about. And if you would like more information about what we do as a sanctuary committee, you can let me know, okay? So first I want to let you know that last year, the year of 2025, I attended the wakes of 3 asylum seekers. The first was a 49-year-old father of 9. He had died on Christmas Eve of 2024. His wake and funeral was early 2025. And this fella was the father of the first family that we assisted with housing. The father, the mother, and the younger children had arrived in spring of 2023. And the older children, the adult children, arrived in the summer of 2023. Fortunately, one of our churches was able and willing to provide housing, and this church is still working with this particular family. I helped him do his asylum application. He had signed it, and this was in early January of 2024. And within less than a week, he had his first heart attack. We didn't know if he was going to survive, so I helped the mom complete her asylum application, and we filed them both at the same time. He was able to recover, but then subsequently in the spring, he was hospitalized 2 more times. Oftentimes, I would give him a ride to his cardiologist,
And frequently, there were times when he could not get medication. He could not get the prescriptions that the doctor had ordered. There was another test that the cardiologist had ordered. I don't know if it's the MRI or the CAT scan, I don't remember, but he could never get that test done. And so in August of 2024, he had another heart attack, and he struggled to survive and to recover, but he died on Christmas Eve of 2024. And he was buried at the beginning of 2025. The second person is another young man in his mid-20s, and apparently he had not been getting medical care and had some kind of unknown medical condition. He and his partner were in a car accident. His partner, no problems, no injuries. This young man had developed a cardiac incident, and then he passed away. The third person is a young woman in her mid-20s and from another country. All are from different countries. Again, a young woman with 3 young children in her mid-20s. And unfortunately, she had had a relationship with a man who was guilty of domestic violence. She did not come from one of the families that I worked with, but we worked with a lot of different smaller groups across the neighborhoods, and her contact with that group of ours always talked about her and said what a wonderful mother she was, and trying always to find her better housing. And so in December, her former partner got into the apartment, there was an argument, and he stabbed her 3 times in front of her young children. So I attended that wake at the end of the year. Now, we don't know if the 2 men, if they had gone to medical care, would have survived. We don't know if the mom, if she had had intervention for domestic violence victims, would have survived. But we can say, I can honestly tell you that without the medication, without the medical care, without the intervention, all 3 of these people would have lived. So these are fatalities of the system that we are working within. The other thing I want to talk about is something that was quite interesting in the immigration court. We are part of the Sanctuary Working Group. Sanctuary Working Group has an accompaniment program. I assist with the training of volunteers and also accompany folks to USCIS, to ICE check-ins, and also to immigration court, most frequently immigration court. And I get referrals from our different churches as well as through the participants who are being assisted by Sanctuary Working Group. In September, I accompanied a young man who was one of the adult children of the fellow who passed away because of his heart condition. And at that hearing, his judge is Judge Klosinski, Klosinski. What Judge Klosinski did during that hearing was to ask the people if they wanted to go forward on their own that day or if they wanted time to get a lawyer. And so unfortunately, although I had spent time talking with this young man on the way down to court, he offered, after the judge asked him that question, I have my asylum application. So without explaining what he was doing, the judge said, okay, do you want to go forward? We're going to go forward today. And so he asked the young man about the preliminary questions, the biographical questions at the beginning of the asylum application. And then he set it for trial in February. So from September to February to prepare for trial for any lawyer is quite pressure, especially when you're trying to get documents from foreign countries. So fortunately for this young man, because we had an organization involved with the family, he was able to get an attorney, and we're hoping that the trial goes well next month. Because it's such a large family that whatever happens to him is going to impact everybody else in his family when their cases come up to trial. So then a few weeks ago, I had accompanied people to 3 different courtrooms. And it turned out that the judges were saying the same thing. They were saying to the pro se asylum seekers, the people who don't have lawyers, they were saying, do you want to go forward today
on your own, or do you want to ask for a lawyer? Now, these people, most of them yet don't have work permits. In order to apply for a work permit, you first have to apply, first have to submit your asylum application. Then you have to wait 150 days. And then you can apply for the work permit. So most of the people, except for one woman, said they wanted time to find a lawyer. I didn't know at that point in time that that carried a totally different negative impact on these individuals. Until yesterday, when one of the women who I had helped with her asylum application contacted me and said, my clock has stopped. They call it the asylum clock. And so I couldn't figure it out, and I walked over to immigration court. I was downtown volunteering, and I found out from the clerk that, and I couldn't believe this, that when a pro se asylum applicant asked the judge for more time to find a lawyer, that now the judges are stopping the asylum clock because now they are saying that this is a delay that is being caused by the asylum applicant. So I went back to our office and I talked to one of the lawyers. We looked it up, and sure enough. But what is interesting is this, that in the years previously leading up to now, up to September or maybe August, immigration judges were using their discretion to allow these individuals to have another continuance for another preliminary hearing during which they could get their work permit, get a job, save their money, and hire a lawyer. So what are we dealing with now? Okay, what's going on now is that once that order is entered and that asylum clock is stopped, that woman will not be able to apply for a work permit. If somebody does not provide her with the funds to assist her to find a lawyer and have that lawyer go into immigration court, file the appearance, ask the judge to advance the case, set it for trial, until that point, all that time is going to pass, and that individual will not have the opportunity to apply for a work permit. It's kind of like taking somebody by the throat and increasing the pressure around the throat. It's very subtle. And they are not explaining this. And this happened with Judge Klaczynski. It happened with Judge Luskin, Luskin. It happened with Judge Kreitz, Krites. And I haven't been to other judges recently, but I wouldn't be surprised if other judges are doing this. So there is no explanation in immigration court explaining to these people when they ask for that continuance that their clock is going to stop and they're not going to be able to apply for work permits. So they put them between a rock and a hard place. Either you continue the case now, you do your biographical information, and then he sets it for trial 6 months to try to find a lawyer in 6 months, okay, to prepare for trial. Or you ask for a continuance and then he stops your clock and then you can't get a work permit. So where's the money going to come from for that person to be able to hire a lawyer to proceed with the trial? Okay. The last thing I wanted to mention is this, that we do have that wonderful state law, the Trust Act, but I have some concerns about it. The young man who was bamboozled to say he wanted to go on his own, I accompanied his sister and her partner to immigration court at the end of the year. And it was continued. He asked for time to get a lawyer. It was continued. And within half an hour of leaving them, because they had a car, she called and she tells me that his cousin has been arrested and detained by ICE. So she puts me in contact with the detainee's wife, the arrestee's wife. I called her and she said she was on the way to Broadview. She had documents she had to turn in. So I went to Broadview, and by the time I got there, she had already turned in the documents and she was back on her way home. So I drove to the Northwest Side and I spoke with the mom, and there was this large family, a large, humongous extended family. And I explained to her what the process was going to have to be. She agreed to do that. The following day, I started to make phone calls to immigration lawyers. And there were two issues then, because first of all, he had an asylum application pending. But what they told me that afternoon meeting was that what had happened to the man is that they went to a family birthday party, not far from where they live. And he had been working so hard that he fell asleep in the car. He did have something to drink. A Chicago police officer, remember this, a Chicago police officer stopped at his car, saw that there were empty beer cans in the back seat, tested him, and found that he had a 0.08, which is the minimum for a DUI, and charged him. And so she said that he had been told by the ICE agent that the following day, after he had been charged, he was on his way to work. ICE agents were waiting outside the house and they grabbed him. So my question is this, because he had not yet been to traffic court. So the only person who had information about that arrest was the arresting officer. Okay? So I did make the report to the hotline, and I did mention this, and what happened about it, I do not know. We were able to find him a criminal defense attorney who would discount his services and to try to get the DUI kicked. However, then the issue was bonding him out, and he was now in Indiana. And so that family just decided they're going back to their home country. They're going to self-deport. Earlier, I was contacted by a woman, and we had been helping her cousin, and she told me that what had happened to her husband was detained in Louisiana, and that what had happened was that for Mother's Day, they had decided, them and two other families had decided to go on a picnic. Unfortunately, they decided the state forest around Dixon. And so this man thought, well, I need to pick up some supplies for the barbecue. He went to the Walmart. He was stopped, and that police officer charged and ticketed him with DUI, but gave him the opportunity to continue to use the car. So at that point in time, he had a pending court hearing in traffic court. The mom went to traffic court, explained why the husband could not come. And so she had called me for rent support because she could not work, he was not working. So we provided them with sufficient rent support until the end of this month, at which time, because he's already been deported, at which time she's going to self-deport with herself and her children. So again, this was a situation where the only people who would have known, he had gone to court once in Dixon. So the only people who would have known about this traffic violation would have been the charging officer and personnel at the courtroom. Unless, of course, we can imagine somebody who's sitting in the aisles walking up to the clerk to try to get information, but I don't think that would have happened. So there's some serious concerns that I have about the strength of our Trust Act. I can give you a lot more information about a lot more families, but the best thing that I can say to you is this, is that we have many people of good hearts. This has been an opportunity for us to come together in solidarity, regardless of our religious beliefs, regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of our language, regardless of our culture. And this networking and the solidarity is the secret for us to continue to resist with strength and with integrity. For the asylum seekers and for other undocumented and documented immigrants, the stress and the anxiety is absolutely incredible. Okay? I get a phone call from a mom who's crying because she hears that ICE is over by her child's school. She wants to know if he's safe. I get a call from the young man who has his trial in February, crying because he had finally gotten a job And the people at his workplace said that they had to deduct $400 for Social Security. The amount of stress and pressure that we are imposing upon our new arrivals and our immigrant community is inhumane. It's inhumane. Thanks for taking my testimony. Thank you for that. I guess I should just clarify for the record, the asylum court system, the immigration courts aren't actually federal district courthouses. The judges are lawyers who are hired by the Justice Department to dispose of these cases. And if you appeal it, it's within the system to other appointees of the Department of Justice, which of course is now run by Pam Bondi. And I know years ago and until recently, a lot depended, whether you got asylum or not, should be decided objectively on whether you meet the 5 criterion of having to leave your country under the UN Charter Agreement. But the cases often came out decided by which judge got it and whether the judge had previously been an ICE prosecutor or previously been a pro bono attorney, and it was a roll of the dice. I think, and I'm curious if you have a sense of how, since Trump came in and a lot of immigration judges were fired and replaced, how the system has changed. They are replacing some of the fired judges, but not to the extent where they're going to be able to keep up with the number of cases that are pending. And in terms of the neutrality of those judges, they're getting more subtle. Before they had agents outside in the hallway getting ready to arrest people. I have yet to see that. They have had people where the judge would approve a motion of the DHS lawyer to dismiss a case without explaining to the pro se applicant that by dismissing the case, that was also dismissing their asylum application and that they would be arrested and detained. But what is happening now, in addition to what I mentioned before, is that, and it really depends upon the discretion of immigration judges. What is happening now is that there is that pre-termit program that Trump has put together with countries like Guatemala, Ecuador, Honduras, Paraguay, and Uganda, where people can be shipped out to continue their asylum process in any of those countries. And so the discretion comes, and I've seen this happen when I accompany people to immigration court. It really depends upon the judge. For one judge who had the lawyers first, the lawyers always come first, and she asked them to plead for their clients, and they pled for their clients to the charges on the notice to appear. In that case, the DHS lawyer said, we're filing a pre-termit motion, and she said, we'll just give him the allotted time. She actually gave him additional time for the pre-termit motion. And then when the pro se clients began, this judge did not ask them to plead to their notice to appear. And the DHS lawyer then made a motion for pre-termit, and her comment was, even though he has not pled, and that DHS lawyer then withdrew that motion. But other judges are in fact allowing those motions. They're saying the DHS lawyer is saying we are going to file those the pre-termit motions in X number of days, 7 days, 14 days. But the point is that those pro se applicants have no idea what that means, none whatsoever. So the next thing that happened is that they're going to find themselves on an airplane to Ecuador, Honduras, Guatemala, Paraguay, or Uganda. They have no idea that this is happening. Thank you so much both for what you're doing with asylum seekers and for coming here to put it on the record. Who's got questions? Go.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
First of all, thank you so much. Peace and blessings for your courage, your testimony, your spirit, and everything that you are doing and have done for so many, many years. I'm very interested in hearing more about this case with CPD and if you've determined whether or not it was simply the police officer or something even, I think, even more concerning and insidious is the possibility of ICE having access to police data like that at even those type of arrests. Is there any determination about beyond the possibility of that one officer contacting ICE agents, of them being able to acquire information like that and show up at this person's house?
I have no direct knowledge, but I will tell you this. I made the home visit the same day that the man was arrested, and we were notified of it, and I made the report to the hotline. But it was mostly, that home visit was mostly speaking with this very large congregation of family members. And also when the mother explained to me that he did have this ticket, and the following day, he had a court, in traffic court. He had his hearing in traffic court. I explained to her she needed to go down there in the morning and tell the judge what happened so that there was no arrest warrant issued on the traffic violation. I've made a second home visit that following day. She told me what happened at traffic court. By chance, the father called her when I was there. The husband called her while I was there. So I got on the phone with the husband, and he told me that the ICE agent had said to him at the time of the arrest that he was being arrested for the DUI. Okay? So where that information come from to the ICE agent, I have no idea. I cannot tell you. But it would have been impossible for the ICE agent to have said that at that point in time because it had not even come up in court. So what we are doing is we're giving as much rent support to the folks, especially those whose spouses are or partners are in detention. And now we are starting to work identifying as many immigration lawyers as possible. We can't cover everything, but we can at least get them started with the understanding is that at some point in time, they will be responsible for covering the balance of the cost of the legal services. And for our folks who are arrested and detained here and then shipped to other detention centers, we're trying to identify our sister dioceses, identify clergy, identify churches who are close to these detention centers to see if we may be able to, at the minimum, get them some kind of pastoral visits, okay? So, but it's a work in progress, and we just have to be as flexible as possible as circumstances change.
Thank you, Reverend Sandra. It's good to be with you here. We've done a lot of work together over many years. I have two questions for you that I would like to get on the record. One of the questions is related to so much of the dialogue about legal and illegal, right? And so we hear a lot of particularly white nationalists using the term illegals. But even people who just simply don't have a basic understanding of how people come into this country. So I wondered if you would say something about people coming into this country with permission and what that should give them in terms of due process. And then my second question is related to self-deportation and how the government is making it sound like anyone who wants to self-deport can self-deport, when you and I know that's absolutely not the fact. And I've talked with you about two women that are in our network who have been trying to self-deport back to Venezuela for months and are still stuck here in this country despite having a judge's order saying they can self-deport. So can you also speak about that and the difficulties of leaving this country even when they want to?
Thanks for reminding me of that. I promised my supervisor that I was going to mention something that I forgot to mention. So let me start with the habeas. Has anybody explained habeas? As Chairman Tulsky said, it's very, very difficult now to be able to track people down in detention centers and also find judges that are willing to balance the factors that previously would have allowed somebody to have been released on bond, okay? That used to be the law. That used to be the law. That if you could prove, say, Jose had been in the country for 25 years, he had a solid job, he had 6 kids, he put the kids through school, they were all college and university and high school, that he owns his house, he's established, he's not a flight risk. So for a situation like that, you could have asked for a bond and he would have been released, okay? I hope I'm not giving legal advice here. So, but now what happens is if an immigration judge does do that, what happens is DHS appeals it. And it goes up and it sits there and it sits there and it sits there and it sits there. So now what is happening is that attorneys are now going to federal district court on habeas. Habeas corpus, bring me the body. And if we can prove that that arrest was illegal and that person is not a flight risk, then that person will be, there will be an order entered in the federal district court allowing that person, requiring that person to be released, okay? So that is what's happening now. For self-deportation, it is not the first time I've heard that. And we were talking earlier, or there was testimony here and comments here about the government not obeying court orders. It's as simple as that. So how do you get the federal government to obey a federal district court order? You know?
Yeah, and it's also an issue of documentation, right? And so I don't know if everybody knows, but Venezuela does not have a consulate anywhere in the United States. And so people who come into the country with very few documents can't get out of the country without very specific documents, which they can't get here in the US because there is no consulate. And so it's this never-ending circle of impossibility. And so they can buy plane tickets, they can have the order from the judge, but TSA won't let them through without a particular form of identification, which they don't have and will never have access to.
You answered the question, thank you. Entry with permission as well. A lot of people were able, not most, but a lot of people were able to wait in Mexico for their appointment with Customs and Border Patrol. And those were the people who were allowed entry on paroles. Okay, so parole means that you can get your work permit, you can get a social security number, and you can start working once you get here. They still need help with housing, health issues, things of that nature. But he did away with parole. So people with TPS, the same thing. But he's done away with TPS. And so those people then, a lot of them felt that because they had TPS before, they didn't really necessarily have to rush to file an asylum application. So now they're between a rock and a hard place. And now we know the way that they are defining, the judges are defining this issue about a continuance for a lawyer, it's going to be very difficult for them to get a work permit and to work legally because the work permit under the TPS was canceled out when the TPS was canceled. And then I should also mention that this country has really turned its back on the individuals who assisted us in Afghanistan. And so we are working with several families. The one that I'm working with the closest, the husband was being trained by the US military in a European country, when the Taliban took power. His wife was pregnant. She was still in Afghanistan. They are from a minority group in Afghanistan. So they would not only be in danger because he was assisting the US military, but also because of their minority status. And so she was forced to go to Pakistan. We were able to bring him here. He is now established with a work permit and has steady work. But although we were able to get permission for her and her child, who he has never seen in the last 4 years since his birth, we were not able to get them in because the State Department denied the visa. So we have all of these individuals who we owe a deep debt of gratitude to, who have assisted us, and who are now going to be returned to Afghanistan because all the countries that have been hosting them are now requiring them to return to Afghanistan. So this is like a multi-aspected situation that impacts not only our undocumented community, our documented community, our recent arrivals, but also it does have an international aspect to it that we should not forget. If I could add to that, so we're talking about like vulnerable people in desperate situations. And while we're turning our backs to Afghanis and many other peoples, we are still favoring or newly favoring the white South Afrikaners, who's, it's a whole different thing. Thank you so much for being here and for raising these issues. Thank you. We're gonna break for lunch until 1:30.
Okay. Chair, I'm sorry, please, and Reverend Castillo, I apologize. May I just put something into the record per our previous conversation? I don't know the answer to this. I just have a couple. Thank you for your testimony. We had said, you know, we could read the questions into the record and then get answers later. But I don't know the answer to this. What does self-deportation mean in terms of implications for whether anybody can ever return? You know, I assume with what you explained about the breadth of families, people with different statuses, is it permanent? I have no idea. The other question is, I've been seeing some things about potential changes and revocation even for naturalized citizens in terms of their status. And so this testimony is important because it helps us know what may be coming next for someone who thinks their status is fine. And then lastly, just your mention of and description of how clearly the stress and anxiety is, your words were absolutely incredible and frankly inhumane. And in your mentioning the human rights work, I just continue to bring that up as well. To note the definition of genocide includes this psychological harm that we keep hearing about as well. So any remedies for that or examples would be helpful later for our write-up. Thank you so much.
I have one more entry with regard to the police officer and that report, what might be implied there. When that officer does that report, it also gets approved by his supervisor, and then it goes up a chain. So what happens is, although that officer might not have done that, it might be the next cop, which a whole bunch of reports get into. And so there could be a little systemic piece there that we miss in the approval process. And somebody might catch it there and forward it. So it could have a greater implication.
Great. Thank you again so much. Thank you. And we'll be back promptly at 1:30, where we're expecting the counsel for the mayor to be our next person. Thank you. And lunch is right outside.